The morning sun rose over New York just like any other day. People rushed to work, children headed to school, and life moved forward in its usual rhythm. No one knew that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. Inside the Global Space Communications Center, technician Robert Brown sat at his desk, sipping his third cup of coffee. His job was to monitor deep space signals, looking for any unusual patterns. Most days were quiet, filled with the regular static of cosmic background radiation. But today was different. The first sign came as a slight change in the background noise. Robert almost missed it, but years of experience had trained his ears to catch even the smallest variations. He put down his coffee and adjusted his headphones. "That's weird," he muttered, leaning closer to his screen. The signal was unlike anything he'd seen before. Clear, structured, and definitely artificial. Within minutes, similar reports started flooding in from space stations and observatories around the world. The signal wasn't just coming from one direction. It was being broadcast from multiple points across the solar system, as if someone had surrounded Earth with invisible speakers. Dr. Lisa Parker, the head of GSCC, rushed into the monitoring room. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with barely contained excitement. "Is it confirmed?" she asked, looking over Robert's shoulder at the incoming data. "Yes, ma'am. We're picking it up on all frequencies. It's definitely not natural." The next few hours were chaos. As teams worked to decode the signal, military leaders gathered in emergency meetings, and news started leaking to the public. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. Then, at exactly 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time, the message began playing on every electronic device on Earth. "People of Earth." The translation read, "We are the collective, a union of spacefaring civilizations. We come with urgent news and grave concern for your species." The message continued, explaining that their long-range sensors had detected a massive gamma-ray burst heading directly toward Earth's solar system. This cosmic event, they explained, would strip away Earth's atmosphere and sterilize the planet's surface. "Based on our calculations," the message continued, "the burst will reach your solar system in approximately 1 Earth year. We can offer evacuation for a limited number of your species, roughly 1 million individuals, to ensure humanity's survival." The world stopped. In Washington, D.C., President Williams sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by his advisors. The room was silent as they processed the implications. 1 million people, out of nearly 8 billion. "Get me every world leader on the line," he ordered, "and contact the UN. We need to verify this." Over the next 24 hours, the world's top scientists worked tirelessly to check the collective's warning. Using data from space telescopes and the information provided in the alien message, they'd reached a terrifying conclusion. The aliens were right. The gamma-ray burst was real, and Earth lay directly in its path. Panic spread across the globe. People rushed to stores, clearing shelves of supplies. Others gathered in churches, mosques, and temples, seeking comfort and faith. Some simply sat in their homes, holding their loved ones close. The collected ships appeared in orbit 3 days later, massive vessels that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. Their presence made the situation real in a way that no message could have. As world leaders debated how to choose the lucky million who would be saved, something unexpected happened. In a small laboratory in Seattle, Dr. James Miller looked up from his quantum physics calculations with wide eyes. "This can't be right," he whispered, checking his math again. But the numbers didn't lie. There might be another way, a way to save everyone. He reached for his phone with trembling hands and dialed Dr. Anna Roberts, the leading expert in gravitational engineering. "Anna," he said when she answered, "I need you to look at something. I think we might be able to save Earth. All of it." The warning had come. The countdown had started. But humanity wasn't ready to accept defeat just yet. Dr. James Miller's office was a mess of papers, coffee cups, and hastily scrawled equations. He hadn't slept in 2 days, but his eyes were bright with excitement as he explained his theory to Dr. Anna Roberts. "Look at these calculations," he said, pointing to a whiteboard covered in complex formulas. "We've been working on phase shift technology for quantum computers, right? But what if we scaled it up?" Anna frowned, brushing her gray-streaked hair from her face. "Scaled it up? James, you're not suggesting the entire planet?" He grinned. "We could phase shift Earth itself." The idea was crazy. Impossible. But Anna found herself studying the equations anyway. After 20 years in gravitational engineering, she had learned that impossible often just meant hasn't been done yet. News of their proposal spread quickly through the scientific community. Within days, a video conference was arranged with the collective's representatives to discuss the idea. The alien that appeared on the screen looked almost like a tall, silvery tree with eyes scattered along its trunk. Its voice came through the translator with a hint of what seemed like pity. "Your species shows admirable spirit," it said, "but what you suggest is beyond even our capabilities. Phase shifting an entire planet would require more energy than your sun produces in a day." Dr. Miller leaned forward. "With all respect, we think we've found a way. Earth's magnetic field. We can use it as a natural conductor. Combined with the right quantum frequency, we could create a resonance effect that would multiply our available energy." The alien's eyes flickered in what might have been amusement. "You would risk your entire species on an untested theory. Better than choosing who lives and who dies." Anna spoke up. "We either save everyone, or we try until the very end." After the conference ended, President Williams called an emergency meeting. World leaders gathered virtually to hear Dr. Miller and Dr. Roberts present their plan. "The technology exists," James explained. "We've successfully phase-shifted small objects in our lab. The principles are the same. We just need to think bigger." The Chinese premier spoke up. "How much would this cost? How many resources?" "Everything we have," Anna answered honestly. "We'd need every nation's full cooperation. Every power plant, every factory, every scientific mind working together." To everyone's surprise, the Russian president laughed. "So the choice is between certain death and betting everything on a crazy plan." He smiled. "In Russia, we have saying, when bear chases you to cliff, sometimes you must jump." One by one, the world leaders agreed. Project Earthgate was born. The collected ships remained in orbit, watching as humanity threw itself into the greatest engineering project in history. More aliens arrived, drawn by curiosity or pity, coming to witness what they assumed would be humanity's last desperate act. In his lab, James worked on the quantum mechanics while Anna focused on the gravitational equations. They had to find a way to keep Earth's matter stable during the shift. Otherwise, the planet might simply fall apart. The aliens might be right, Anna said one night, looking at their latest failed simulation. "Maybe this is impossible." James walked to the window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, death was racing toward Earth at the speed of light. "Remember the first time humanity tried to fly?" he asked. "Everyone said it was impossible, said we weren't meant for the sky." He turned back to her. "But we did it anyway. That's what humans do. We achieve the impossible because we're too stubborn to give up." Anna smiled, turning back to her calculations. He was right. Throughout history, humanity had faced extinction-level threats, disease, war, climate change, and somehow always found a way forward. Now they faced their greatest challenge yet, but for the first time since the warning, hope began to spread. All across the planet, people came together with a single purpose. The aliens had offered to save a chosen few. Humanity had chosen to try saving everyone instead. And somehow, against all odds, they were starting to believe they might actually succeed. The world changed faster than anyone thought possible. Factories stopped making cars and started producing phase-shift components. Power plants ran at full capacity, feeding the growing energy grid. Even children joined in, their schools becoming centers for basic component assembly. At the heart of this transformation stood the newly built Project Earthgate headquarters in Geneva. The massive complex housed over 10,000 scientists and engineers from every nation on Earth. Dr. Miller stood at the main control room's window, watching teams of workers install the first quantum relay station. Similar stations were being built at strategic points around the globe. Each one would help channel and control the phase shift energy. The latest results from India just came in, Dr. Roberts said, walking up beside him. She handed him a tablet. They've managed to increase power efficiency by another 12%. James studied the data with growing excitement. This could work. It's actually going to work. Above them, the alien observation ships continued their vigil. More arrived each day, turning Earth's orbit into a crowded parking lot of extraterrestrial vessels. They watched, they studied, but none offered to help. "Let them watch," Admiral West said during the daily briefing. The old military man had been put in charge of global security for the project. They'll have front row seats when we prove them wrong. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday morning. A team in Brazil discovered that Earth's magnetic field wasn't just useful for conducting the phase shift energy, it was essential. The planet's natural electromagnetic field would act like a protective cocoon, keeping everything stable during the shift. "Think of it like a soap bubble," Dr. Roberts explained to the Global Council. "The magnetic field will hold everything together, while the phase shift generators change our quantum state. We won't just be moving Earth, we'll be moving the entire bubble of space around it." Not everything went smoothly. The first full-scale test in Australia caused a massive power outage across 3 continents. Another test in Canada accidentally phase-shifted a small lake, making it disappear for 5 minutes before it popped back into existence. But with each failure came new understanding. Humanity learned, adapted, improved. One of the alien observers, who called itself First Speaker, requested a meeting with the project leaders. Unlike its previous visits, this time it seemed genuinely curious. "We have been monitoring your progress," it said through the translator. "Your approach is unorthodox, but we begin to see possibilities we had not considered." James couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best solutions come from those with the most to lose. The first speaker's eyes flickered, and what they had learned was an expression of agreement. "Perhaps, but you still face enormous challenges. The energy requirements alone are being solved," Anna interrupted, pulling up the latest global power grid data. "Look at these numbers. Every nation has exceeded their energy production targets. People are voluntarily cutting their power usage to support the project." The alien studied the figures. Impressive. But the coordination required is happening right now. Admiral West cut in. "For the first time in human history, the entire world is working together. We've got teams in every country running simulations, building components, solving problems." The first speaker was quiet for a long moment. "Your species continues to surprise us," it finally said. "We will share our observations with the collective. Perhaps we have something to learn from you as well." After the alien left, the team returned to work with renewed energy. The phase shift relay stations were nearly complete. Power grids across the planet hummed with gathered energy. In orbit, satellites were repositioned to help coordinate the massive effort. Time was running out. The gamma-ray burst was now visible through powerful telescopes, a distant but approaching doom. But for the first time, the aliens weren't just watching with pity. There was something new in their observations. Interest, maybe even respect. "They're starting to believe," Anna said, watching another alien ship arrive in orbit. James nodded, turning back to his equations. "Good. But what matters is that we believe. And we're going to prove that humanity doesn't just survive. We find ways to do the impossible." Project Earthgate was no longer just an act of desperation. It had become humanity's statement to the universe. "We will not go quietly into the night." The island of Malta was chosen for the first major test. Small enough to control, but large enough to prove their theory. As dawn broke over the Mediterranean, its 500,000 residents watched from evacuation ships, their homes about to become part of history. In the control room in Geneva, Dr. Miller's hands hovered over the activation controls. Screens around him showed power levels from every major station around the world. Dr. Roberts stood beside him, checking the final calculations. "All stations report ready," Admiral West announced. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the back of his chair. James took a deep breath. Starting phase shift sequence in 3, 2, 1. The air over Malta began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Power readings spiked across the board. In orbit, alien sensors recorded everything, broadcasting the event across the galaxy. For exactly 3.7 seconds, the island of Malta vanished. When it reappeared, the cheering could be heard from the evacuation ships all the way to Sicily. The first major test had worked. An entire island had been successfully phase shifted and returned. But the celebration was short-lived. "Something's wrong with the data," Anna said, frowning at her screens. "The energy consumption was much higher than our calculations predicted. At this rate, we won't have enough power to shift the entire planet." The next few days were a blur of activity. Teams around the world analyzed the Malta test data, looking for ways to improve efficiency. The answer came from an unexpected source. A young technician in Kenya, watching his daughter play with soap bubbles, noticed something they'd all missed. The bigger the bubble, the less soap it needed proportionally. The same principle might apply to their phase shift field. "He's right," James exclaimed, running new simulations. "We've been scaling up the power requirements linearly, but they should actually decrease relative to mass. The larger the object, the more efficient the shift becomes." This discovery changed everything. New calculations showed that shifting the entire Earth would actually require less energy per ton than shifting Malta had. The planet's own mass would help create the field they needed. But they still faced another problem. During the Malta test, they'd noticed that some buildings had shifted slightly, moving a few millimeters from their original positions. On a planetary scale, such shifts could be catastrophic. Dr. Roberts spent 3 days locked in her office, emerging with bloodshot eyes but a solution. "We need anchor points," she explained to the Global Council. "Fixed quantum markers that stay in normal space while everything else shifts. They'll act like tent pegs holding reality in place." The alien observers were now actively engaged, their own scientists studying the human theories with growing interest. The first speaker joined the daily briefing sessions, offering insights from their own experiences with quantum mechanics. "Your species," it said one day, "has accomplished in months what took our civilization centuries to even consider. We did not believe it possible because we never dared to try." Construction began on the quantum anchors, massive structures that would maintain their position in normal spacetime while the rest of the planet shifted. They had to be built at precise points around the globe, taking into account Earth's magnetic field lines and gravitational patterns. Time was running out. The gamma-ray burst was now visible to the naked eye at night, a growing point of light that everyone tried not to look at. But instead of panic, there was purpose. Every failed test, every small success brought them closer to their goal. "Look at this," Anna said one evening, showing James a global power usage chart. "Power consumption in cities has dropped by 80%. People are voluntarily going without electricity to support the project." James smiled. "That's humanity for you. Push us into a corner, and we don't just fight back. We change the rules of the game." The final breakthrough came during a worldwide test of the anchor system. For a fraction of a second, they managed to phase shift the top layer of Earth's atmosphere. It was barely noticeable to most people, just a slight shimmer in the sky. But it proved their theory worked on a planetary scale. They were ready for the next step, attempting to shift the entire Earth. The only question was, would they have enough time to pull it off? The mood in the Geneva control room changed the moment Admiral West walked in. His face was grim as he activated the main screen, showing new data from deep space telescopes. "The burst is accelerating," he announced. "Our original calculations were wrong. We don't have 4 months left. We have 3 weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Miller looked at the data, then at Dr. Roberts. They both knew what this meant. Their careful timeline was now useless. "How certain are these readings?" Anna asked, though she already knew the answer. "The aliens confirmed it," the Admiral replied. "Their sensors are picking up gravitational effects we couldn't detect before. The burst is being pulled faster by a black hole in its path." James stood up, addressing the room. "Right then. New timeline. No more tests, no more small-scale trials. We move to full implementation now." Around the world, the news sparked a frenzy of activity. Construction crews worked around the clock, rushing to complete the remaining quantum anchors. Power plants pushed beyond safe limits, gathering the energy they would need. But rushing had its price. During the installation of a quantum anchor in the Ural Mountains, a power surge destroyed 3 months of work in seconds. In Brazil, a miscalculation caused a generator to explode, taking out their entire regional power grid. "We can't keep going like this," Anna said during an emergency meeting. "We're making too many mistakes if we rush the final implementation." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what failure would mean. The first speaker, now a permanent fixture in their control room, offered a suggestion. "Our ships could provide additional power from orbit. It would not be enough alone, but perhaps it could help stabilize your grid." It was the first direct offer of help from the aliens. James looked at Admiral West, who nodded slowly. "Thank you," James said. "We accept." As alien ships connected to Earth's power grid, something unexpected happened. Their presence created a new problem. Their mass was affecting Earth's magnetic field, disrupting the patterns they needed for the phase shift. "Turn everything off," Anna suddenly shouted one morning, rushing into the control room with a stack of papers. "All the anchors, all the generators, everything." James looked at her in confusion. "What? Why?" "Because we've been thinking about this all wrong," she explained, spreading out her calculations. "We don't need the anchors. We don't need half of what we built. What we need is right above us." She pointed up, toward the moon. "The moon's gravitational pull. It's constant, it's predictable, and most importantly, it's natural. We can use it as our anchor point. One massive anchor instead of dozens of artificial ones." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting Earth's natural forces, they would work with them. The moon's gravity would act as a tether, keeping Earth stable during the shift. But there was a catch. "We'll only have one chance," James explained to the Global Council. "The moon needs to be at exactly the right position. The Earth's magnetic field needs to be at peak strength. And every power station on the planet needs to fire at precisely the same second." "And if we miss?" someone asked. "Then we tear the planet apart instead of saving it." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some wanted to stick with the original plan, despite its flaws. Others saw this new approach as their best chance. Finally, President Williams stood up. "How long until the moon is in the right position?" Anna checked her calculations. 17 days, just under the time we have left. The president looked around the room. "Then we have our answer. Better to try something that might work than stick with something we know won't." As the meeting ended, James found Anna staring out the window at the moon. "Having doubts?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, just thinking about how far we've come. A few months ago, we were arguing about whether this was even possible. Now we're about to try something no species has ever done. And we'll succeed," James said firmly. Anna smiled. "Because we have to." Above them, the gamma-ray burst grew brighter each night, a constant reminder of what was at stake. They had one chance to save Earth. And the clock was ticking. The day Earth was meant to disappear started like any other. The sun rose over silent cities, their streets empty as people gathered in designated shelter areas. Power plants across the planet hummed at maximum capacity, feeding energy into the global grid. In Geneva, Dr. Miller and Dr. Roberts sat at their control stations, surrounded by screens showing data from around the world. The room was packed with scientists, military personnel, and government leaders. Even the alien observers stood quietly in the corner, their multiple eyes fixed on the displays. Moon position optimal in 30 minutes, Anna announced, her voice steady despite the tension. James looked at the main screen, where a countdown timer ticked away the seconds. They had synchronized every clock on Earth to this moment. Power stations would fire automatically when it reached zero. Final systems check, Admiral West called out. All stations report. One by one, confirmations came in from around the globe. Power plants were ready. The phase shift generators were primed. Emergency systems were standing by. 15 minutes to optimal position, Anna said. The first speaker moved forward. Our ships have cleared Earth orbit as requested. We will observe from a safe distance. It paused, then added, good luck. As the alien left, James thought about how much had changed. The same beings who had once offered to save a mere million humans now watched with hope as humanity attempted to save itself. 10 minutes. Around the world, people huddled together in shelters, watching screens that showed the countdown. Parents held their children. Strangers clasped hands. For the first time in human history, every person on Earth was united in a single moment. 5 minutes. James, Anna said quietly, if this doesn't work. It will, he replied, reaching over to squeeze her hand. It has to. 1 minute. Power readings began to spike across the globe as plants fed energy into the grid. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. 30 seconds. Earth's magnetic field strengthened, responding to the massive energy buildup. Static electricity made hair stand on end worldwide. 10 seconds. James took a deep breath. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Initiate phase HFY. The world exploded with light. Every electrical device on Earth surged. The sky turned purple as the magnetic field became visible to the naked eye. Then the vibrations began. It started as a low hum, but quickly grew until the entire planet was shaking. Buildings swayed. Oceans rippled. The ground itself seemed to pulse with energy. Phase shift at 10%. Someone shouted. Windows shattered worldwide as the vibrations intensified. The air began to shimmer, like the whole planet was covered in heat waves. 20%. Magnetic field stable. Power grid holding. The shaking became violent. Emergency alerts flashed on screens as fault lines worldwide began to shift. 50%. Moon gravity anchor holding. James watched the readings climb, his knuckles white on the edge of his console. Everything they had calculated said this would work, but seeing their planet shake itself apart was terrifying. 70%. The sky turned completely purple now, the air so thick with energy it looked like liquid. 90%. For one heart-stopping moment, everything went silent. The shaking stopped. The world held its breath. Then reality itself seemed to bend. Earth shifted. From the alien observation points, it must have been an incredible sight. The entire planet, along with its atmosphere and the space immediately around it, simply flickered and vanished. The gamma-ray burst passed through empty space where Earth had been just moments before. Inside the phase shift, humans experienced something no species had ever felt before. The world became transparent, like everything was made of glass. Light bent in impossible ways. Time felt strange, both fast and slow at once. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was over. Earth reappeared in normal space. The purple sky faded back to blue. The shaking stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cheering erupted from every shelter, every bunker, every gathering place on the planet. The sound of celebration echoed around the globe. In Geneva, James and Anna looked at each other with tears in their eyes. They had done it. They had actually done it. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had phase-shifted an entire planet. 1 month after the greatest feat in human history, the world was still coming to terms with what it had achieved. Cities buzzed with renewed energy as people returned to their normal lives, though nothing felt quite normal anymore. In Geneva, Dr. Miller stood at his favorite window in the Project Earthgate headquarters, watching alien ships land in the newly constructed diplomatic zone. Unlike before, they weren't coming to observe. They were coming to learn. Another delegation just arrived from the collective, Dr. Roberts said, walking up beside him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. Apparently, they're bringing their top quantum physicists this time. James smiled. Remember when they thought we were too primitive to save ourselves? The success of the phase shift had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Earth had become the center of scientific attention. The species that had barely mastered space travel had somehow accomplished what advanced civilizations had deemed impossible. Admiral West entered the room, looking more relaxed than they'd seen him in months. Latest reports from the global survey teams are in. Apart from some minor geological shifts, everything's exactly where it should be. Even the fish in the oceans didn't notice anything wrong. And the power grid? Anna asked. Almost fully recovered, though I doubt we'll ever need that much power again. They were interrupted by the arrival of the first speaker. The alien diplomat moved differently now. Gone was the air of superiority, replaced by genuine respect. Your achievement continues to reshape our understanding of physics, it said through the translator. 3 other worlds have already begun studying your methods. They believe the phase shift technology might help protect colonies from solar flares. Glad we could help, James replied. Though I hope nobody needs to shift an entire planet again. The first speaker's eyes flickered in what they now recognized as amusement. Indeed, though perhaps smaller applications would be useful, we have much to learn from each other. That was the biggest change. The aliens no longer saw Earth as a primitive world to be protected. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. In the weeks following the shift, Earth's governments had come together in unprecedented ways. The cooperation that had saved their world didn't end with the crisis. New global initiatives were launched, focusing on space exploration, clean energy, and technological development. Did you see the latest proposal? Anna asked, showing James her tablet. They want to build a phase shift research center on the moon. Use it as a base for testing new applications of the technology. Makes sense, James nodded. After all, the moon did save us in the end. The lunar gravity anchor had worked perfectly, keeping Earth stable during the shift. Scientists were already talking about using similar principles for other projects. Outside, a group of school children pressed their faces against the fence of the diplomatic zone, watching alien visitors with excitement rather than fear. For this new generation, interstellar relations would be normal. The Collective's Council has approved Earth's membership application, the first speaker announced. You will have full voting rights in galactic matters. Admiral West grinned. Not bad for a primitive species, eh? The alien's translator crackled with what sounded like laughter. We have learned not to underestimate humanity. Your methods may be unconventional, but your results are undeniable. As they watched the sun set over Geneva, James thought about how far they'd come. From a species facing extinction to one that had changed the course of galactic science, all because they refused to accept defeat. What's next for us? Anna wondered aloud. Everything, James replied. The phase shift was just the beginning. Now we know what we're capable of when we work together. There's no limit to what humanity can achieve. The first speaker moved to join them at the window. Your species has taught us something valuable. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from advanced technology, but from the simple determination to survive. Above them, stars began appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars that had once seemed to hold humanity's doom now beckoned with promise. Earth had not only survived, it had thrived. And somewhere out there, other civilizations were looking toward Earth not with pity, but with wonder, asking themselves, what will humanity do next? The answer, as always, was up to them.